FM 98.5 CKWR. I am now, the boys are finally here. I guess you got stuck in traffic. I'm thinking you got stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
I have Wayne Bond and Darryl Romphf in the studio with me. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Any better would be you.
Well, I'm glad you made it. We've got about 25 minutes. So just without further ado, you've brought in a special CD. So you wanted to talk about, what's the Sgt. Pepper's 50th anniversary thingy that you want to talk about?
Well, it's the remix of the record done by George Martin's son. Obviously, it's a classic album that means so much to so many people. We just want to go through a couple of the songs and talk about, you know, what it meant to us and maybe some of the production techniques and different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Darryl?
Yeah, the first track on the disc, I believe, is we've got queued up is A Day in the Life.
A Day in the Life.
And this is the stereo remix. So Wayne has actually educated me a lot on what the new package entails.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. It's fantastic. Like, sonic purists or vinyl purists might say it's different. You know, it was intended to be mixed in mono. This is the updated stereo version from the original multi-tracks. So the fidelity's a lot better. It's clear. It sounds fantastic.
I already told people that you guys are two ace musicians / producers on when you were on your way in. So we're going to play A Day in the Life. We'll be right back with Wayne Bond and Darryl Romphf on FM 98.5 CKWR. So I have Wayne and Darryl in the studio with me. So, okay, take it away, boys. I'm your producer now.
This is the 50th anniversary of the Sgt. Pepper's release.
Yes.
And you'd asked Wayne and I to come in and talk about it. We both make records and have for years.
Yes.
By no means are we the Bible and study of the Beatles or Sgt. Pepper, but
oh no,
you know, we just have a few anecdotes. And Wayne has a ton of dates and times and stuff like that. So we were chatting beforehand on the way here. That the Beatles recorded. They were rolling tapes between '66 and 67. So that calendar year, 12-month period, tapes were rolling for both Revolver and Sgt. Pepper.
In the same year, yeah.
That's a big deal. You know, like the Beatles are known for releasing material quickly, you know, not this like 24-month album cycle idea. This was a different thing.
Yeah,
so,
that's
and the
true,
fact that they pulled themselves off the road. They were bored as musicians. It was
not improving because they couldn't hear themselves.
Yeah, they couldn't hear themselves. They were a danger in every city they went. The people were in danger because of just mob mentality almost.
This is true.
They were in danger. They lived in
a bubble.
Bathrooms and hotel rooms is where they would hang out, and armored cars. That's all they had. So an album like Sgt. Pepper comes out of that isolation and boredom. In my mind, that's a big part of what was going on.
Yeah, and they were also wanting to do songs like John Lennon said, we want to do songs that are specifically made for the studio that can't be played live. Nowadays you can do it live and you can have, the orchestras and sequences and everything up on your keyboards or whatever, but back then, with the 4-track technology and the stuff that they had back then, they couldn't be done live at that time. So also a pivotal thing that happened at that time, the engineer for the sessions was changed to Jeff Emmerich, who started working with him on Revolver, and he was 20 years old when he started working with him. So by the time he got to Sgt. Pepper, he was 21. So they'd ask him for certain sounds, and he really didn't have much to work with. They had 2 4-track machines, an echo chamber, a machine that would allow them to have tape delay, not one of these fancy digital delay. That stuff existed back then, right? And a couple of compressors and limiters and stuff. But the only way for him to get the sounds that John Lennon wanted or Paul McCartney wanted was to abuse the equipment. And he actually got in trouble for placing the microphones too close to the bass drum in those days. It was supposed to be 2 feet away, and he put it 2 inches away, right? So nobody had ever heard sounds that up front. I think that was the thing about it too. Like, no one had heard sounds ever recorded that up front, or a drum kit fully mic'd in that fashion. Because drums were generally recorded with 2 or 3 mics back then, as opposed to the whole kit being mic'd. And then compressing the crap out of it, right? So it just really, with everything, guitars, vocals, bass,
Yeah.
So from a technical standpoint, that was a first for that record, and also taking times to craft the sounds, which, you know, the Beatles would be routine in the numbers. They'd be in the studio from 4 p.m. in the evening till 4 a.m. So that gave him a lot of time to craft the sounds, and in those days it wasn't, we'll fix it in the mix later. It was, the decision was made there and then. So the sounds on those tapes are what were recorded at the time, remixed or not. They were the sounds that were recorded.
Yeah, we were discussing that and going through this giant deluxe box set that we've got sitting in front of us.
I know, it's amazing.
It's really something. Yeah, the idea of that the album is remixed, it's not that they went into every individual element, like the delay sound of John Lennon's voice and John Lennon's clean voice, and remixing those together and an echo chamber. No, a lot of these sounds are printed and committed to tape back then, because they didn't have the outboard gear, they didn't have the inputs and outputs. You know, Wayne explaining, like, the stereo mix originally was, if you brought it into the left side of the desk, it stayed on the left. If you brought it into the right side, it stayed on the right. You didn't have the in-betweens in the panning, like 45 degrees and 36 degrees and, you know, left and right. It was hard left, hard right. So that's why you got that sound. It wasn't because that was an artistic decision. It was because that's what that's all they could do.
That's all they could do.
Yeah.
And so the idea that the Sgt. Pepper original stereo mix is sacred and should never be touched. Well, there's the word intention was brought up today with Wayne and I a lot. That what was the intention, right?
Right.
Jeff Emmerich decided not to be involved in the remix of this. I like that idea because he has nothing more to say. This has been voted like it's the greatest record of all time.
I think so.
And he doesn't need to make any more decisions. He made the decisions based on the equipment that he had, the technical that he had, and the band being in the room, and George Martin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They mixed this record based on artistic integrity at the time.
Yeah, where were you the first time you heard Sgt. Pepper?
Well, for me, my dad had the vinyl, and 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, when I was starting to play drums, because before I knew anything about studios or had done anything in that line of it, I used to play along to it on my drum kit. And it was the mono record, which is the one, the records were originally made for mono, so those were the ones that mattered.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, especially when you take into consideration that the mono mix took 3 weeks to make, and the band and George Martin were present, and the stereo mix was just an afterthought, which was done in 3 days, which was just Jeff Emmerich and George Martin. It was just like, because 90% of the listeners or people that bought the records at that time were listening in mono.
Mono, that's right, yeah.
So, but anyways, I used to play my drums along to it ever since then, years later, I guess, jumping forward to like 2003-04, when I did Full Length Mirror with Corey Williams, which, you know, you play a lot here. We kind of took that as a sort of cornerstone for that record with Dark Side of the Moon and Led Zeppelin 4, and we just kind of all put them together, and that made the sound of that record. And there's other things on there too, but
it's a great result. Darryl, what about you? And I know we have a track that we need to premiere.
Yeah, that'll be coming up. But yeah, that for me, I got into
10 minutes. So.
Yeah, I got into the Beatles late. I came in late to the party. I grew up. My parents listened to country music, so I didn't listen to the Beatles. We had a Beatles Greatest Hits vinyl that I thought the Beatles were covering all these songs. I thought there was no way that this one band
could do all
wrote
this
all
work?
these songs. There's no way. There was no way, right? And then I didn't study it and really get into it until, you know, I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And so when I really dove into it was in college at Music Industry Arts at Fanshawe. And when I had a studio time, if I'd had time, I would put the record on and listen to it on great speakers. And I was taught by Jack Richardson. And Jack Richardson's a legendary producer in Canada. The Jack Richardson Award goes to the Producer of the Year for the Junos.
Yes.
He has a museum now in London.
Yes.
He has passed on, sadly, but legacy remains. And that's the biggest thing about Sgt. Pepper is it's not so much about the Beatles or the album or the songs or the person or the tape delay or the drum sound. It's a culmination of all of those things, and it broke the mold and set a new bar for what was possible. It's all about rule breaking. It was about facing challenges and solving problems and overcoming that adversity. And Jack told me a story that he was fortunate enough to be in the session when Sgt. Pepper was being made. He was in London, and he was invited by George Martin, because keep in mind, the Guess Who was the first band to knock the Beatles out of the #1 spot.
Yeah, that's right.
And Jack was the producer of the Guess Who.
Oh,
so
man.
With These Eyes, right? So he was a big deal. That George Martin and Jack Richardson at the time were the two big guys. Long story short, Jack Richardson met the Beatles. He came into a session that he called it hot. He walked in and the band was hot. They were heated. There was discussion. George and Ringo were kind of not fed up, but they just walked out. They just needed a smoke break. And there was a lot of what if. Well, what if we tried? And what if we tried? And what if we tried? The band leaves the room. George Martin said, "Leave it to me. Give me a second. Go take a break, guys." And Jack Richardson watched George Martin and Jeff Emmerich put 2 tape machines of 2 different versions of Strawberry Fields at different tempos and in different keys. And he wanted them both to come up on the console. And so they had to figure out how to do that. And then once they did that, he very sped the tape machine. So slowed one down, sped one up until they came together in the same tempo and key and sounded about right.
Yeah.
Because there was an indecision on which version of Strawberry Fields they should go with. And that's what he did. He very sped the 2 tape machines. And then, that sounds cool. And they brought the band in and said, what did you think? And so that was the impetus for how they put that song together. It was from 2 different versions. And Jack never forgot that. So, 1970, he's doing American Woman.
Right.
And they're doing the song No Sugar and New Mother Nature.
Right.
And in pre-production, he remembered this. Day in the Life he had heard in progress. He had heard Strawberry Fields and watched how they did it. And he pulled in this technique of, why don't we just put it together, and we'll put it together here. He did the tape machine trick to show them how to do it, and then they tracked it like that.
Oh, okay.
So, the Beatles' influence goes... It shows up like on every other record, it seems. There's something that comes from this.
Yeah, that's amazing. You guys have such insight into this. We need to get together and do some more of this for sure.
We could go on for days.
We could.
Days, yeah.
But I know that you have a new track, and I'd like to play The End of the End, probably kind of sign out with that.
Sure.
Which track is
It is the final track on that.
On the final track.
Yeah. So this is a local band called Lo-Fi Mind.
Right.
Who they have an acoustic record. They have an independent release and an acoustic record out. This is a debut, actually, of the latest record that I produced with them. And this is the rough mix. We're going to be pulling it up, mixing shortly by the end of the year. It should be done, and it will be up on a old Neve board, designed by George Martin and Jeff Emmerich. It's in Toronto now. One of 3 in the world.
From Montserrat. Yeah.
From Montserrat, yeah. So there's 3 of them ever made. 2 of them in Canada, one in Vancouver, one in Toronto, and we're gonna pull this up on that. So this one's called 8 Legs.
Well, thank you so much, you guys, for coming in. I'd like to thank Darryl Romphf and Wayne Bond for coming. You guys are ace musicians, ace music producers. We're so lucky to have you in this area. Here's brand new Lo-Fi Mind on FM 98.5 CKWR. Thank you so much, Darryl and Wayne.
surfing through the satellite waste, picking lint up from the floor, feeling lazy in a zen kind of way. Doesn't matter anymore. This is the end of the end, walking past the past again. Painting by numbers, looking into mirrors. The silence is deafening, but I can hear Tom Waits playing on the stereo, so I don't remember anymore. This is the end of the end. This is the end of the end. This is the end of the end. This is the end of the end again. Things were looking down, now they're looking up, and the band still plays that little tune from yesterday. Surfing through the satellite waves, picking lint up from the floor, feeling lazy in a zen kind of way. Doesn't matter anymore. This is the end of the end, walking past the past again. This is the end of the end. This is the end